Welcome, everyone. It's always an exciting time to gather together, although this this occasion obviously is one that is more difficult as we are at the 1 year. I was speaking to some people. I don't like using the term anniversary. Anniversary usually has a positive connotation, to something happy, something joyous, but it is the 1 year mark of the October 7th tragedies and travesties and the horrendous events. Of course, we do know that in Judaism, we usually focus on the yard site, the actual Hebrew date, which we know is Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah in Israel, and it's actually a big discussion how we are going to, on a day that's generally associated with Simcha, how we are going to remember, the events. But in the meantime, it certainly caught on worldwide to focus on the term October 7th, and so it would be we'd be remiss not to commemorate on this day. I just want to begin by thanking the sponsors of tonight's evening. Starting with the Adler family, thank you very much, and the Wolfson family, as well as the Schlesinger family, the Rauschberger family, the Jacobs family, the Fern family, the Levy family, the Laster family, the Baumgarten family, the Goldman family, and the Eunice family, and the... Leave anyone out? Raise your hand. You can still sponsor. It's not too late. And then the Brook family as well. Thank you. Yes, I knew I lost one person out. Thank you very much. Again, it is due to sponsorships that we're able to continue having these great events that are technically not in the shul budget, as it were, but it enables us to continue having them and for everyone to come together and enjoy. So thank you very much for those sponsorships. It is now my privilege, before I do two introductions whenever we partner with Chazaq, and that is it is a tremendous privilege that Baruch Hashem we do partner with Chazaq, and we have been for the last couple of years, and it is my honor and privilege to call on Rabbi to speak a little bit about Chazaq and the work that Chazaq does, and in particular with communities and beyond. Be glad for Rabbi.
We give myself a round of applause. Of course, my dancers here. Round of applause for all of this for the community. I know you're here for the rabbis. I guess you just a quick remark. Of course, on behalf of Chazaq, we Baruch Hashem have partnered so many times with the shul, with the leadership of the shul, the rabbi, and Baruch Hashem we've so many people have been inspired, Baruch Hashem, from these amazing events. Chazaq organizes these community events to give inspiration to men, women, young, old, everybody to get to gather together, ba'achdas, in unity, just like tonight. And Chazaq and everyone is of course welcome to take one of the calendars we have in the hallway, a new calendar for the new year, and obviously in the calendar you'll learn more about Chazaq's programs with public school outreach programs in 20 different locations, community-wide lectures, different communities, and so many different outreach programs that we do for the community. And and I guess one message just about we're here on October 7th, and we're doing Seres Yemei Tshuva, these 10 days of repentance. So we're all thinking, what are we going to do to remember the October 7th and these precious neshamas, the people who were murdered on October 7th, as well as how we're going to have a better year this year than maybe last year. So I think one message we could take is from none other than our great Rabbi Danziger. He was actually recently on the Chazaq podcast. If anyone didn't see it, I was thinking there's a link for the rabbi. They know about it. They've seen it at least 4 times each. But so the rabbi quotes Rav Volbe, and he says, let's just say someone says, okay, fine, I want to be better this year. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to take out a piece of paper, take out your pen, and you write down what you're going to be better in. So what do? You take the paper, you fold it once, you fold it again, and you fold it again. And then what does that mean? Someone says, I want to do 4 acts of kindness every single day to be better. So what do? Someone's going to take it's too much. I'm going to make me do it for a day, a week, whatever it is, it's not going to happen. If I take it in half, whatever, I'm going to do 1 chesed, 1 act of kindness a day, it's actually going to happen. Someone says, I want to learn 3 hours a day. You take it again and again, maybe we'll learn a half hour a day, 15 minutes a day, whatever it might be. So that's maybe a message that we could all take upon ourselves, and to have a new year. May it be a great year, and it's a great honor to come on back to Rabbi Dansgary.
Wait, is that clapping from here for Rabbi? I was like, I keep score. No. We have a tremendous opportunity tonight to be hosting, to be visited by Rabbi Y.Y. Rubinstein. Rabbi Rubinstein is really a worldwide speaker. He speaks really throughout the world, which is the definition of worldwide, but speaks throughout the world and is a prolific author, a prolific speaker, one that he has an amazing history. Again, you can listen. Speaking of the Torah Talks, I think number 67 was Rabbi Rubinstein. I only know because I listened to it today. But Rabbi Rubinstein really is, again, a prolific speaker. Really speaks in many opportunities for Chazaq and for Gateways and for many other programs. I mentioned to someone today that Rabbi Rubinstein was speaking tonight, and they were floored. They said, "Wow, Rabbi Rubinstein's coming to Roslyn. It's an amazing thing." And so we want to thank Rabbi Rubinstein on this occasion, where we are all looking for inspiration, both between the Aseret Yemei Tshuva and October 7th. We're looking for inspiration, ways to be better, ways to grow, ways to connect. And without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to invite Rabbi Rubinstein to address our community tonight.
Kavod Rav. I should express, of course, my sincere thanks for the invitation to join you here. I have to tell you, since we've moved, I live in Inwood in the Five Towns, and Roslyn is one of my absolute favourite places that I've discovered in Long Island, and I didn't even know there was a Jewish community here. And here you all are. It's fabulous. So I'm really extremely pleased and honoured and grateful to the sponsors for making this happening. Of course, Chazaq, and again, as say your Rov. I was very excited to discover that you've got a member of the show here who is from Britain, UK. He's good. So he's going to be handling the translation. Yeah. In fact, I have to tell you, when I first moved to America, this was about 20 years ago, I was giving my first ever talk. It was in Manhattan, in Wall Street, in a very large room, and there's about 200 people there. And after I finished speaking, there was two old guys sitting in the front. And I overheard them. One turned to his friend and said, "The guy's brilliant." His friend said, "Yeah. What'd he say?" She said, "I haven't a clue, but he's brilliant." So my big success since I moved to America, lecturing up from coast to coast, is that nobody's got a clue what I'm talking about, but they think it's clever, and that'll do me. I should also explain why I think that the wheels that turned behind the scenes to make tonight happen, why I was invited here tonight. And the Rob actually wanted me to allude to this. You see, many years ago when I was still living in the UK, I started broadcasting for an organisation called the BBC. I don't know. The British Biased Corporation. And so it was quite challenging. There was the big programme, the news programme, is very different in the UK to America. Most people in the UK get their news from radio, something called BBC Radio 4. They've got a programme called the Today programme, and that's for 3 hours in the morning, and it's very well listened to. The Prime Ministers listen to all the politicians listen to this. Her Majesty the Queen, who liked me, Aleha Shalom, who liked me and asked to meet me. Sorry, I just let that slip out. She listened to it. I'm sure the King listens to it as well. It was a big program. And they had a thing in it called Pause for Thought. So apart from all the news and politics and stuff going on, they would have a religious figure who would talk about the week's news or the day's news from a religious perspective. And I was invited to contribute to this. Now, this was the BBC. And that meant that you had to prepare a script which lasted 4.5 minutes. Being the BBC, 4.5 minutes means 4 minutes 30 seconds. Not 4 minutes 29 or 4 minutes 31, but precisely 4.5 minutes. And I was successful at this. And as a consequence, I then was invited to something called BBC Radio 2, which is sort of like pop music for old folk. And they still play things like the Beatles. But it's the largest station, 26 million listeners. And they also had a slot where they would bring in a religious guy to sort of like say something topical or humorous. And I was invited to become a regular in that. What Oprah Winfrey is in America, there was somebody over there who was an Irish guy called Terry Wogan, and I became a regular on that show. 3.5 minutes. That's beginning, middle, and end, not 3 minutes 31 seconds or 3 minutes 29 seconds, but precisely 3.5 minutes. And as a consequence of being successful at that, I was invited to speak on BBC World Service. Minimum audience, 156 million people. 2.5 minutes. That's 2 minutes 30 seconds, not 2 minutes 29 or 2 minutes 31. 2.5 minutes. So when people heard all over the Jewish world that there was a rabbi who could speak in 2.5 minutes, the invitations started to flood in.
Let's do it.
So I suspect that's why I was invited here tonight. Therefore, in conclusion,
It's the feast on Edwin.
but the rabbi did want me to mention that I used to have a career in the BBC, and this career came to an end 2 years ago when I rather publicly, in fact, I became far more famous when I resigned from the BBC than when I actually used to broadcast in the BBC. And as our theme is the very sad and serious topic of October the 7th, it's a question of when that hatred, where do you think that hatred started, or when did that hatred start? Well, about 2 years ago, a group of Israeli kids, Orthodox kids, I think, turned out to be from Israel, were in one of these open-top double-decker buses, and round about this time of the year, December time, they were going to Oxford Street, which is, of course, the big, shopping area. And they go down out the bus to sort of like see, it was Hanukkah as well. And they were just watching, and they were attacked by a group of Muslims. And they had to get back onto the bus quickly. And they were throwing shoes at them and threatening to kill them. And because everybody these days has a cell phone, and the entire incident was videoed, and at that point the BBC could not ignore this, which of course would be their natural tendency to do. But when they reported it, they added to the story. They decided that the story was just not good enough by just telling the truth. Throw in a couple of lies and that will make it much better. And instead of the Arabs and Muslims shouting they're going to kill the Jews and all sorts of language which we don't use, certainly in a synagogue, they accused the Jews, the Jewish kids, they're only 15, 16-year-olds, of shouting dirty Muslims. When this was broadcast, it caused quite a fuss and quite a horrific reaction because it was simply a lie. And it was recorded in a million phones. The BBC claimed they brought it to some Jewish person whom they refused to identify, who translated the Hebrew as being dirty Muslims, but in actual fact it was somebody saying in Hebrew, this is a terrible, terrible situation, somebody phone the police. That's all. But they transported this into the Jews saying nasty things about the Muslims, and then it's okay, you see. Otherwise, it's the Muslims who are the instigators, just like October the 7th. The BBC wants to say it's, of course, our fault. Yeah. And I thought, well, that was it. A lifelong 25-year career, broadcasting, writing programs for the BBC, appearing on the BBC, TV, radio, and all that sort of stuff. This was my moment to make the maximum impact by leaving now publicly and loudly, which I did. Consequently, I found myself very busy in the next week recording TV interviews for TV stations all over the world, Australia, etc. Wanted to know why there's a Paul Simon song, Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, you remember that? And it says in it, there's some line, I don't know how this is going around my mind, we got ourselves on the cover of Newsweek. Have you heard that was in the song? And I got myself on the cover of Newsweek. Famous British rabbi resigns from the BBC as a protest of their anti-Semitism. Oh, and boy, that's a good place to find anti-Semitism, institutional anti-Semitism. I left saying it was institutionally anti-Semitic, and irretrievably so. And if your patriotic American soul is going, yeah, limeys, redcoats, of course we all know that I'm afraid the media here, I now speak as an American citizen, my fellow Americans, is sadly just as biased, if not more biased, than it is over there. Anyway, where does it start? Let me tell you a story. This goes back, gosh, when did I move here? 18 years ago. I got a phone call one day, and this was because I was sort of well known and famous and all that stuff. I got a phone call from the Church of England, as I did all the time. A phone call because the Church of England, where I'd become somewhat aware that there was a problem for Jewish students on campus in England, because they're really quick like that. There's an expression I've been trying to master since I moved to America. People tell me I don't get it right. It's supposed to go something like, duh. So there's a problem with Jewish students on campus. They wanted to hold a whole day on the subject, a conference called Conflict Resolution on Campus. And so there was to be 3 speakers. A Christian, fair enough, organized by the Church of England, a Muslim, and me. Or Jew, and would I become the Jew? And I said, yes, would I come to this thing? And I said, yes, I would do this. And so they had this conference. It must have been about 1,000 people there. And there were religious representatives, people working, chaplains working on campus from every conceivable faith. And so I was to give one of the 3 keynote addresses. And so I decided that because my main job at the time, apart from writing books and speaking again over the world and the BBC, was my main job. I was the official campus rabbi for the 14 universities of the northwest of England, like Manchester and Liverpool and stuff like that. So this was right up my alley. And so the topic they wanted me to speak about was the new anti-Semitism. The new anti-Semitism. So I wrote my lecture out the night before, and it was really pretty hard-hitting stuff. I was not taking any prisoners. I was telling it like it was. And I went the next day for the conference. I can't remember what time I was scheduled to speak. And they say there's 1,000 people there. And when I saw them, Muslims and Christians and Buddhists and Hindus and Sikhs, etc., Hare Krishna, they're still about. I thought, there's no way I can give this lecture. It's so hard-hitting. And everybody was all so English. Hello, Father. Hello, Amen. Drinking cups of tea with a pinky pointing upwards, right? Lots of front teeth. Hello, hello. That's huge. And they were just all so polite and all so nice. And here I was, sort of like, because, I'm me. And I thought, there's no way I can give this talk. And so we started, chatting over tea. And then I thought, there's no way I can say this. They're so English. And I thought to myself, yeah, but you're Scottish. So I decided to give it. So the first person who spoke was somebody from the Church of England. Now remember, the title of the conference was Conflict Resolution on Campus. This fellow turned out to be the chaplain to the then Her Majesty's Armed Forces. He was specialising in work in the Royal Navy. And he stood up and spoke for half an hour on his work in the Royal Navy. Now remember the title of the conference? Conflict Resolution on Campus. So he stood up and how he performs mass in force 10 gales in the Atlantic, etc. On and on and on. And then eventually he finished his talk and they did a slot of 10 minutes for questions. So there was a fellow sitting in the front row wearing one of these white collars that... in England it's called a dog collar, by the way. I don't know what we call it here in America. What's it called? Clerical collar, we're calling it. Dog. So the guy was from Wales, Welsh accent, quite sweet. And he said, Reverend Harris, I've been intrigued by your presentation about your work in the Royal Navy. Fascinating. But I wondered if you could, as it were, abstract an element of your presentation which interfaces with the theme of today's conference. Which was the nicest way I've ever heard anybody being told, you've been talking garbage for the last half an hour. And the poor guy couldn't do it. He just carried on talking about the Royal Navy. Anyway, that was that. Anyway, so I was to speak next, and there was a whole group of Muslim guys, Sikhs and Sunnis and stuff, sitting at the front, not looking terribly pleased to see me. Which is why I'm nice. Anyway, so basically, I looked at my notes and I said, okay, here, let's go for it. So I said to them, I've been asked to speak about the new anti-Semitism. And I'd just like you to be aware that the new anti-Semitism is precisely and exactly identical in every single respect to the old anti-Semitism. If I walk down the street in London or in Manchester, which is where I lived, and somebody shouts Palestine or Gaza at me, they haven't stopped me to see whether I'm an Israeli, whether I'm a Zionist. It's just that I'm a Jew. And as a Jew, and then whatever it was, 2000 whatever, 2010 or whatever, if in 2010, I am personally responsible for all of the suffering of the Palestinian people. In medieval Europe, I killed Jesus. Personally, I was up there on the ladders with the hammers and the nails, banging them in. No, I'm personally responsible for the suffering of the Palestinian people. And they're all going, I said, however, I think it would only be fair to be honest and frank with you. There is no doubt, since the founding of the state in 1948, that it was responsible for a massive refugee problem. Now, this got lots of nodding from the Muslims in the front, and indeed from most of the people. There is no doubt, since the founding of the state in 1948, that it was set up to accommodate the religious requirements of one religion and one religion only. It has been involved in several wars and arguably has been responsible for the outbreak of several wars. It is believed to have corrupt politics and corrupt politicians. And it is nuclear armed, so any of its conflicts could easily evolve into a third world war. Lots of nodding. But I personally wish Pakistan and its people the very best of luck.
Good.
This did not go down too well with my audience in the front row. And then I said to them, and if you thought I was talking about the state of Israel, that's because you suffer from anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is, of course, to single out one person and blame him or her for the crimes or the flaws that everybody is guilty of. The state of Israel is blamed for the crimes and flaws that every state manifests. Think, after all, Pakistan and India was just round about 1948. India was split into two. Pakistan was created specifically for Muslims. And think about all the states that were created when the British Empire disappeared post-Second World War. Think of sub-Saharan Africa. Think of the human rights obscenities that happened there. Think of the human rights obscenities that are happening now with 1 million Uyghurs, Muslims, incarcerated in concentration camps by China. Nobody could give, forgive the phrase, a damn about that. It's only when Jews are involved. So I said, if you thought I was talking about the state of Israel, it's because you suffer from anti-Semitism. So the same fellow in the front wearing the collar stuck it, was like, Rabbi Rubinstein, I've been intrigued by your presentation on the new anti-Semitism, and I feel that what you're talking about and telling us about is precisely what the Islamic community in the UK is suffering from today, from Islamophobia. I think he was trying to ingratiate himself to me. He did not succeed. I said, that's anti-Semitic! The guy nearly jumped out his skin. I said, look, no Jew is walking down the streets in England with a big sign saying London will be Muslim. No Jew in the UK today is planning another terrorist attack like 9/11, like they had in London, and the buses and the tubes and the undergrounds. But that is happening in the Islamic community. To draw a contrast and comparison between the two, that's anti-Semitic. This was the last time I was invited to address this conference. About just before COVID, so about 2019, something like that. I got a phone call from a rabbi. He's the rabbi of the Young Israel Shul in Staten Island, and I must admit I've forgotten his name. And he phoned me up and he said that he and his congregation were organizing a Yom Limud, a day in which people would be studying Torah, as their reaction to an event that had happened to the shul which had caused great distress and upset to the people in the shul. And what had upset them so much was that somebody had dropped a Sefer Torah. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a shul when somebody drops a Sefer Torah. Thank God, good. I once dropped a Sefer Torah. Well, I didn't drop a Sefer Torah. I had a Sefer Torah. I did a tour of Scotland. I brought Orthodox Jews to a tour of Scotland. And that's so beautiful. I think I'll say it again. Scotland. And when I took the Sefer Torah to my room, my hotel room, there was a nice chair in the hallway outside. One of these like round, padded, almost like a semicircle that you could sit in. Nice padded seat. And I was aware I didn't want the Sefer Torah to fall. So I situated it so it was at an angle and it wouldn't fall. But it slid. And I don't know how. While I opened the door, it just went like this. Horrible, and therefore only I saw it, thank goodness. So I had to fast the next day, which is the normal reaction. This synagogue, what they wanted to do was they wanted a day of Jewish learning with various rabbis, well-known rabbis, to come and speak as their reaction, their response to what had happened. So would I be the first speaker? And I said, of course. Drove over to Staten Island. And when I got there, the show was absolutely packed. I mean, everybody was taking this seriously. And so I sat in one of the seats, and the rabbi stood up there, very nice fellow, and he said, we all know why we're here today. In case anybody doesn't, somebody dropped a Sefer Torah. And when it happened, we were all very distressed, and I was particularly distressed, and I kept asking myself, why did that happen to us? Why did that happen to our show? He said, look, you all know me. I've been your raw for however many years it was. I'm not the sort of rabbi who stands in front of his congregation and bangs his fist on the bima and says, oh, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. So I was thinking to myself, but why did it happen to us? And if you were to ask me honestly, what should we be improving? So, well, look, we have been working on not talking during davening. And we've been successful, but to tell you the truth, I think we could do a little bit better in that regard. And then, if I bring a guest speaker, a guest rabbi from Israel or whatever for a Shabbaton to speak, be with the community over the weekend, then lots of people come to hear his shiurim and hear the speaker, but if I'm really being honest, more people could do it. More people could come. And we're not a rich synagogue, he said, but you know, when there's an appeal, people put their hands in their pockets and they give. But once again, I think we could dig our hands more deeply into our pockets.
Hey.
And the reason I say this to you, he said, is because you all know who dropped the Sefer Torah. And I sat there and my jaw, you know, in Judaism, it actually says in the Talmud, rather than embarrass somebody in public, throw yourself in the fire and burn to death. That's quite dramatic, right? I never embarrass somebody in public. So, and you all know who it is that dropped the Sefer Torah. What? And he said, in case you don't know, it was Marty Feldman. Right? And the reason that I tell you that is because, why did it happen to Marty Feldman? Because Marty Feldman, he's always the first in shul. He would never talk during davening. If there's a guest rabbi or guest lecturer, he's always there listening to every single lecture. He's not a rich fellow, but he always puts his hand in his pockets and gives what he can give. So why have him of all people? So I was so distressed about this, I went to see the famous Rabbi David Feinstein. He was the son of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. And when he heard the story, he didn't bat an eyelid. He just said, well, of course it had to be Marty Feldman who dropped the Sefer Torah. Because had somebody else dropped the Sefer Torah, people say, oh, I know why he dropped the Sefer Torah. Yeah, because he's miserly. He never writes a check, that guy. Or somebody, I know why he dropped the Sefer Torah. He never comes to any shir. He doesn't support the show. Or he's too busy talking during the show. But as it was this guy called Marty Feldman, who's never guilty of any of those 3 crimes, nobody's going to turn around and say it's their problems because of them. They're going to turn around and say it's because of us. It's very easy to turn around and say somebody else caused this. But really, so often, the message is for us. I'm not sure exactly what proportion of American Jews, and this is being filmed, if they were to watch this video, would understand very much of what I'm saying, or what I'm going to say. Simply because so many American Jews are estranged from any knowledge of their religion whatsoever. I remember my first ever trip to America. I was living in Liverpool, where the Beatles came from. In fact, at the top of a place called Penny Lane. And I was in a thing called the Cowlell Institute for Post-Rabbinic Studies. And I had to go collecting funds, which I hate doing. I was walking down the street, I think it was called La Brea, in Los Angeles. And there was a guy sitting in a restaurant, outside the restaurant, and he was eating a lobster. Now, he had a very Jewish face. He looked Jewish. And so I walked past him and I couldn't resist him. Because by this stage you've probably got a measure of my personality. I said, hi, I said to him. And well, he's from Los Angeles. You know, anybody here from LA? Good. So my wife's from LA. So I said, hi. He went, hello. Wearily. I said, are you Jewish? And he said, yes. I said, so am I. He said, I can see that. I said, you from LA? He said, yeah. I said, I'm from Scotland. Scotland? And I was suddenly was very interested. So we chatted a little bit further. And I said to him, do you mind if I ask you a personal question? He said, no, go ahead. I pointed at the lobster. I said, is that kosher?
Yeah.
And he said to me, I think so.
Yes, sir.
I think so. And he did. The vast majority of American Jews, I think, would say, yeah, why not? Because they don't know. And if they don't know, they don't really say us. They say them. The Jews in Israel, those Jews there, we're doing this, that was crazy. They don't get it. The message is us. The people in this shul get being Jewish. The people in this shul study and know what being Jewish is about. When something as horrific as October happened, October the 7th happened, then our reaction is, it's a message for me. It's our family. I don't know anybody, I think, that was at that rave party, whatever it was. I don't know anybody who was living in these communities right next to the Gaza border because they actually idealistically believed that coexistence with a fundamentalist Islamist group was a possibility. But if it was set us down, I would be the guys that they would be out in the streets of Tel Aviv as they were demonstrating against Netanyahu and the Haredim and all that sort of stuff. I would be the opposite of these guys, but I don't see them as the opposite of me. As we say in our davening in Shabbat afternoon, Atay Echad, God, you're one. Shimcha Echad, your name is one. Umika Amcha Yisrael, Go Echad Ba'aretz. And who is like the Jewish people? One nation. And there's another beautiful Jewish teaching that says, Kol Yisrael Arevin Zeh Bazeh. Every Jew's got a little bit of every other Jew in them. Did you know you were part Scottish?
What?
There's a bit of me and you and a bit of you and me.
That's first they write checks.
So, it's not just the right checks. Scottish people don't write checks. You've all heard of Lakewood, and of course the great yeshiva there. The rabbi who founded Lakewood was somebody called Rabbi Kotler, and he came from Europe. And I just bought myself a set of his books. So I had an old set, but I bought myself a new one. And I found an incredibly interesting thing. Listen to this. As we are in the period of tshuva, of returning to our roots and returning to our relationship with God, there are 4 levels. This is the Rambam, the famous Rambam. Maimonides says there are 4 levels of, as it were, apology that's necessary for things we did wrong as a Jew. Number one is, you did something wrong, and what thing you did wrong was something you should have done, but you didn't do. For example, guys put on tefillin in the morning, right? So, you didn't do it. That's a positive mitzvah. Mitzvah's a thing. You didn't do it. So you've done something wrong. You omitted to do what you should have done. What is the prescription to put it right? Just be sorry. Be sorry. Try not to do it again. Mean you're not going to do it again. And the slate's wiped clean. That's good. Suppose you didn't, instead of doing something, omit to do something you should do, you did something you shouldn't do. You went to McDonald's because you always wanted to know what a Big Mac tasted like. Right. Then that's a don't do mitzvah. So what's the reaction there to wipe the slate clean? In that case, you've got to regret it sincerely. Promise never to do it again. And that works, but you need another ingredient. You know, sometimes you get a stain in your shirt or your top, and you put it into the washing machine, and it comes out, and it's gone, but there's a little shadow you can just see. So what do? You put it in again. You need another wash. The other element to get rid of the stain is Yom Kippur. Apart from saying sorry, Yom Kippur. Fine. So far, so good. Yeah, you with me? You're going to love the next bit. Suppose the thing that you did wrong is a serious no-no. One which, if there was a Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court in Israel, might get you skedal, but you skedashed. Right? The death penalty. Then what are you supposed to do? What? You got to do the, I'm sorry, I'm never going to do it again. Fine. And then you need Yom Kippur. Yeah. And then, the thing that will get the stain removed is suffering. This is really making Judaism sound very appealing, right? And that will get rid of your crime. Except if the thing that you did wrong involves what's called a Chilul Hashem. What's a Chilul Hashem?
Listen.
A desecration of God's name. You drag God's name through the dirt. Then what you need, you're going to love this. You're going to love this. You need the sorry. You need Yom Kippur. You need suffering in your life. And then, death! Yes, ladies and gentlemen, look forward to a life where the day of death is just around the corner and you can be forgiven for anything you did wrong. Praise the Lord. Now, does this appeal to anybody here? Okay. So the Rambam Maimonides says, just to cheer you up, that's Rambam, but there's somebody called Rabbeinu Yonah. And Rabbeinu Yonah says, there's a simple way to be forgiven for anything, including the Chilul Hashem, the desecration of God's name. And that is, instead of making a Chilul Hashem, you make a Kiddush Hashem. You do something which is so important, makes such a statement of belief, that it literally wipes everything clean. You don't have to go through suffering. God forbid you don't have to die. Just try to go in the opposite direction, and that's enough, which is nice. But Baron Kotler says an astonishing thing. What is the ultimate definition of a Chilul Hashem? And he says the following thing. Incidentally, this essay was written, it doesn't say exactly what year it was. It's just, do you mind if I read to you a bit of Hebrew just to prove I'm a properly qualified rabbi? Is that done? Can I? Devorim shenemru b'fnei b'nei yeshiva. This is a speech that he gave in front of the yeshiva. Be'ez sherachifa sakona milchama al yoshvei Eretz Yisrael. When the Jewish people in Israel were facing a terrible war. But it doesn't say when, which war. Now, he died in 1963, so it can't be the 6-day war because up to 67. There was, of course, that little blip of 1956 when the Israelis and the French and the British invaded Egypt, but that wasn't really much of a danger. So it must have been 1948. He says the ultimate Chilul Hashem. I'll read this bit to you. He says, and he's quoting a Gemara, so it's Torah, Al perish min hatziba bizmanshu sharoi b'tzar. The ultimate Chilul Hashem is for you to turn away and disconnect your concern, your sympathy, or your worry from the Jewish people when they're going through terrible, difficult times, as we are now. To not see yourself as family, to not realize there's a bit of you and me and me and you, and certainly us with the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Is there anybody here who doesn't have family there? I have 2 sons and lots of grandchildren there. And even if I didn't, I would still feel part of people in Eretz Yisrael. That, he says, is the ultimate thing. And he says, particularly at this moment in time, when the Jewish people are facing a war of extermination, 1948, exactly, sadly, as we are today. I want to read this to you. This is a letter from a rabbi to his son. See what you think of this. I recall when I was a young boy hearing my father once saying that if you want to know what the new year is likely to bring, you should look back and consider what has happened during the past year, October the 7th and the rest. Think about how many catastrophes and how much pain came to the world. That will make you realize that what was being planned for us last Rosh Hashanah, in turn, that will force you to contemplate how much we have to worry about this Rosh Hashanah, which is just around the corner, the father writes to the son. That's when those plans are being made again, when it's being decided what's going to happen to us again. And of course, we're in the middle of the 10 days when we can change it round. What might be in them and what might be in store for us next. In this past year, my father's words have haunted me and echoed around my brain every single day, especially as he drove home his message by saying, son, even though you're very young, try and fix this in your memory. Later in your life, you'll probably need to draw on them. In this past year, my father's advice was my constant companion. What has happened to us over the last months and what will happen to Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, in the months and the years to come? Before last year, only one country loudly and proudly declared their utter hatred of Jews and their determination to wipe us off the face of the earth, Iran. Today, that declaration can be heard loudly in every capital and major city in the world, New York, Los Angeles, London, and every European capital. The voices speaking up to support us are very few and fading fast. There have been physical attacks on Jews across the globe and several murders too. News of such attacks has almost become a daily occurrence. There are the low-level assaults in Jewish communities and the religion erupting everywhere. Several countries have banned Shkita and others are planning to join them. Of course, there are the attacks in towns and villages in Israel, with the north evacuated and made Judenrein, free of Jews, by drone and missile attacks. Tens of thousands of Jewish refugees have been forced to flee Eretz Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. Before last year, Israel was seen as a sanctuary and refuge for Jews hoping to enjoy a relative degree of protection and security. Suddenly that perception and reality has vanished as Israel and over half of the Jewish people face an existential threat. Does that ring a bell with you? Can you relate to that? Do you know who the rabbi was? It's somebody called Rabbi Dessler, and he wrote it in 1936. I just changed a couple of the details. He said, instead of one nation wanting to wipe us out and saying that he said Germany. I just changed it to Iran. But the thing about being refugees within Israel, from Israel, that's what he wrote. A place that we thought was safe, no longer safe. I stuck in a couple of tweaks. But really, the template from 1936 sadly fits us identically today. So where does the hatred start? It's always been there. The new anti-Semitism is the constant anti-Semitism. And sadly, and I'm sure this applies to you, how many of your non-Jewish friends have you suddenly found just aren't your non-Jewish friends at all? I've got 5,000 friends on Facebook. It's astonishing to see the lack of support. Even distant relatives, lack of support from the non-Jewish world as we stand almost alone. Well, what might be in store for us next year? I saw, maybe you saw this, maybe you got Facebook, it was going around as a little picture there. I saw the most beautiful thing. You know, I was in London, I was in England lecturing just a few weeks ago. And the last night of my visit, there's an organisation called Lev Chaim, new organisation in Manchester. And they asked me to speak to a group of men. Every man is either the father of a child with cancer or the husband of a wife with cancer. And because my late wife passed away from cancer, then they knew if I was speaking to them that I would be, as it were, I would get them. I would understand them. it's so difficult. I mean, if I can just speak to the men for a moment, we men are extraordinarily, we find it very, very difficult to ask for help, show our vulnerabilities. I was astonished they actually got a group of men to come together. If you ever go to the Kotel Maravi and you look at the women's side, I'm sure you've done this, the women generally when they're praying, it's something like this. The cedar is up at their face. Tears are flowing down their cheeks. They're maybe swaying very gently back and forth. They're pleading with heaven to change whatever the decree is, whether they've got, maybe they're sick, or their husband's sick, or they've got a sick child, or they don't have parnassah, they've got no income, they're unemployed, or it could be 1,000 different worries. That's if you look at the women's side. If the camera goes to the men's side of the Kotel Maravi, very often you see somebody who's a man davening like this, Rabbi, fighting with heaven. Everybody is a Yaakov Avinu, struggling with the angel. As my wife likes to say, men are fixers. We like to fix stuff. By the time a guy realizes that he can't fix stuff, he's usually done a lot of damage to himself and often other people as well. So the beautiful thing, the little picture I saw on Facebook, which I thought was really, really, it moved me a lot. It was just a piece of paper, and somebody had said, "Dear God." And then about 2 inches under the paper, it just said, "Amen." But between "Dear God" and "Amen," there was lots of drops of tears. That's the most effective prayer of all. In fact, the Talmud says, since the destruction of the Second Temple, the gates of prayer have been closed, apart from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But the gates of tears are never closed. So let's just consider for a second. Before October the 7th happened, and I'm talking to people who can get this. I says, if this was shown in, some documentary channel or something, and people watching this across America, Jewish people, a lot of people just would not know what I'm talking about. Just think I'm bonkers. But let's just consider this for a second. What was the scene amongst the Jewish people? Remember what did we say a second ago? In Mincha we say, Atay Chad, B'Shimcha Echad, you're one, your name is one, Omi Ka'am Yisrael. And who is like the Jewish people? Goy Echad Ba'oretz, one united nation in the land. Not before October the 7th we weren't. Before October the 7th, the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, certainly Israel, was split into, riven into, over 1 million people in Tel Aviv demonstrating there with great animosity. And I'm incidentally, I'm not suggesting that it wasn't not reflected in the other side as well, waving their rainbow flags and their blue and pink flags and their Palestinian flag. In fact, Hamas fighters who were captured said that they watched this with great enthusiasm. It gave them the final push to launch that attack. They were convinced that, as a very famous American philosopher, his name's popped out of my head, said, no nation is destroyed from without until it's first destroyed itself from within. We no longer seem to believe in ourselves. We were fighting against each other and against ourselves. And we were destroying ourselves. Since then, there's been an astonishing reaction. I'd never seen the Jewish people so riven, so split. Since then, I've never seen the Jewish people so united in my lifetime. There's a wonderful fellow called Shai Groucher. You come across this guy? He lives in Israel. He was sort of like, he was the rabbi who supported somebody called Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. He was the biggest rabbi in Israel at the time. And he just decided, this very frum fellow, his father was a famous Israeli singer, to do stuff to bridge the gap between the Jewish people. And he's been doing astonishing things. So let me tell you a story that happened to my wife. My wife, I came home from, goes back about 6 months ago. I came home from shul, Friday night, and my wife, instead of a big smile on her face and a good Shabbat Shalom, she was looking very miserable. I said, what's wrong? And she just looked to where the shelf in which our Shabbos candles are normally twinkling and dancing. She'd forgotten to light Shabbos candles. And a bit like the Sefer Torah falling, particularly for a woman, because it's her mitzvah, she was very, very distressed. So you probably know what the normal prescription is if you forget to light Shabbos candles. Do you know what you're supposed to do?
Actually,
You light an extra candle forever. So my wife said to me, I don't like that. I don't like that idea. Isn't it that if you really are sorry and really do tshuva, just as I said to you a few moments ago, the slate's wiped clean, why should I have this extra candle every week, almost like an accusation, like a finger pointing at me, saying, yeah, look, you remember me? Oh, I'm the guy you forgot to light. Right? And I certainly understood that. So just after that, we saw a video of a guy called Shai Groucher. An Israeli Sephardi Israeli boy had been seriously wounded in Gaza. He was in a hospital bed. His wife was visiting him. They clearly, and in fact, they told us they knew nothing about their religion and kept nothing. But the wife felt she now wanted to do something Jewish. And the thing that she wanted to do was to light Shabbos candles. So basically, this wonderful guy, Shai Groucher, when he heard this, she said, the only thing is I don't have candlesticks. Leave it to me. Out he goes. An hour later, he comes back with 2 beautiful silver candlesticks.
yes.
And on the video, on his website, you can see this girl, just a girl, this young woman lighting for the first time in her life Shabbat candles. And it was very beautiful. My wife and I watched this with tears running down our cheeks.
Yeah.
And my wife said, I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that. Instead of having the Shabbos candle, burning this extra Shabbos candle, how about if I buy candles, 2 candlesticks, for somebody in exactly that situation? Would that be okay? I said, I don't know. I'll ask my Rav. So I phoned up my Rav, lives in Manchester. I said, look, the whole extra candle is only a minhag, it's only a custom. I think this is a very nice alternative approach. So instead of 1 extra candle, there'll be 2 candles. Nice, huh? So she spent some time finding out the phone number of this fellow, and she phoned him up and spoke to his secretary and explained that she wants to do the exact same thing. Could he find a couple just like that couple she wants to light candles for the first time? He phoned back the next day. He's found a young woman exactly like that. Her husband's just been killed in Gaza. Well, she's got a 3-month-old baby, first child. Just married for about less than a year. Baby. So my wife said, I'd like to buy for her 3 candlesticks. 1 for the baby, 1 for the couple.
Yeah.
And that was that. And she sent the money. It was her mitzvah. The next day, he phoned back and said, look, he said to my wife, you've done something very nice, and he gave a lot of money, and we bought beautiful candlesticks. But she doesn't have any parnassah, she doesn't have a job. And somebody's offered a job, but she'll have to work from home. But to work from home, she needs a computer. And she doesn't have a computer. Now, I've got lots of people who give a computer, but maybe you'd like this whole thing to be your mitzvah. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity. So my wife said, okay, I'll phone you back. I just want to discuss it with my husband. So she hung up and she said to herself, I don't need to ask my husband. I know what he's going to say. So she phoned back and said, I don't need to ask my husband. I know what he's going to say. Buy the computer as well. Now we tried, or my wife tried, to ask for no publicity. However, somehow or other, it's on the website. And there is a picture of him visiting this young mother. It was ridiculous. She's just a girl, beautiful girl. And you see him giving the 3 candlesticks. And there's the computer. And then the camera shifts to the little baby girl, utterly unaware that she's come into the world with no daddy. And we just cried and cried. But when my wife's brother heard about this, he was so inspired, he bought a set of candlesticks. And then one of my Talmidim heard, one of my students heard, and he bought a set of candlesticks. And I was speaking at some other event, somebody came and said, how do I get in touch with them? And they bought a set of candlesticks. My wife could have had one candle burning extra every week. I'm honestly guessing by now there may be 300, maybe 400, maybe 1,000. Because we want to touch each other and reach out to each other. If it was, I'm not a prophet, so I can't tell you, but I can't imagine the split that opened up in the Jewish people. The hatred, and the word is hatred, that was existing in Israel between Jews before October the 7th could not have been contributory, could not have contributed to what happened. And if that's a reasonable suspicion to have, if you agree it's not paranoid to think so, then reversing it, just like we said before, how do you undo a Chilul Hashem? You make a Kiddush Hashem. How do you undo something that might well have been contributory to the pain and suffering, a mini Holocaust that we saw on October the 7th, is creating Achdut? Does that make sense? So we accept a challenge. I want to give you a challenge. Now, I can't guarantee this is going to work 100%. But if everything I've said to you tonight makes sense, and I've done this myself, I wouldn't ask you to do something I haven't done myself. If that makes sense to you, I want you to consider the following. In almost every Jewish family or every Jewish person I meet, there is, sadly, along the way, a relationship that used to exist that no longer exists. It might be a relationship between two brothers that's no longer there, or a brother and a sister, or two sisters. It might be a relationship between cousins. It might be friends that were very close and just no longer talk to each other. And God forbid it might be a relationship between a father and a son, or a daughter and a mother. I want you to suggest that when you leave this shul tonight, if this applies to you, and if it doesn't apply to you, then thank God, but you'll bump into some Jew who it does apply to. I want to suggest to you, you tell them to do the following thing. Go straight to your phone, pick it up and say, phone that person, the brother, the cousin, friend. Look, I know we haven't spoken for 10 years. Please don't hang up. I just want you to know, and you've got to say exactly as I tell you. I want you to know I've been thinking about the reason we're no longer speaking, and I've come to the conclusion it was 100% my fault. Now, I know it wasn't 100% your fault, because very seldom when a relationship falls to bits, it's 100% only one person's fault. It's usually wrong in both sides. But you're going to say it's 100% your fault. And then you say, I'd like to come and apologize to you in person. I can't promise 100% success rate, but when I've asked people in shuls to do this, it's usually something like a 90% success rate. That when you go to see them the next day, or the day after, as soon as you can, you'll find somebody standing at a door who will say to you, it wasn't just your fault. It was my fault too. And you'll find you've recovered a brother, a sister, a father, or a son. I said this in a shul in England. There's a lot for when I first started saying this. Oh, it must have been 20 years ago. It was in Yom Kippur. And a day later, a fellow phoned me up with a Manchester accent. I don't know if you've ever heard the Manchester accent. It sounds a bit like this. You get ready with the translation there, right? And a voice at the other end of the phone said, is this Rabbi Rubinstein? He said to me. I said, yes. Rabbi Rubinstein, I was in shul on Yom Kippur. And I said, oh yeah. And I heard you speak. I said, oh yeah. And I heard what you said about phoning my brother. And I said, yes. So I phoned him. And I said exactly what you told me to say. I've been thinking about it. It was entirely my fault. He said, you're damn right. And he slammed down the phone. However, I have to tell you quite seriously, whenever I do this, And I did this recently in another show. Straight away, I got an email. I asked people to get in touch with me and let me know. Straight away, I got an email from a woman who said, I did what you said. I was speaking to my sister for the first time in 14 years. I was in Washington, D.C. 14 people got in touch with me in the following week. They're now speaking to somebody close, a parent, a child. I think that's something we could do. I think it's easy. Well, it's not easy, but it shows that you want to do the right thing. We want to stitch the Jewish people back together again. We don't want that candle twinkling as an accusation. There's bigger stuff we can do. I think my wife's one candle is maybe 300 candles, maybe 1,000 candles by now. I think if you could do that, it would be making a big contribution to putting us back the way we should be. Ata echad, Shimcha echad, umika am Yisrael. And who is like the Jewish people, the way we should be? One nation in the land. It's been an honor speaking to you.